This is Dan Farisi, Group Editor, Commercial and Security with Emerald. So happy to be joined today by Travis Cawthorne, who is Director, Products and Training with Kramer AV, and Art Weeks, who is Product Manager with Kramer AV. Topic of conversation is, of course, AV over IP, aligning with our AV over IP deep dive, which will be all over the May issue of CI plus SSI, as well as on the CI and SSI websites throughout the month of May. We wanted to bring on Travis and Art because, of course, Kramer is a leading voice in the AV over IP category. So who better to speak about trends and topics than they? Thank you again, Travis and Art, for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Thank you.
So let's get right into it. I think it's fair to say that AV over IP has evolved significantly. Do you want to talk about some of the key trends driving increased adoption among integrators?
Different end customer requirements are really driving some of this more adoption in AV over IP because we're able to handle just about anything. Just to give you some examples of some things that I'm seeing a lot recently is odd-size displays and custom LEDs. They seem to be quite popular in the industry. As an example, some terminology you might have heard of is like ultra-wide, like 21 by 9 displays, 32 by 9. I've been seeing you cannot believe the number of 32 by 9 displays that I'm seeing out there. And typically those, they're not a fixed display. They're more of that, the LED actual technology behind the 32 by 9. So these things could be, 8 feet wide, but in that 32 by 9 format. And, one of the beauties of AV over IP is, especially with our SDVOE solution, we don't really care what the format is. We can handle that custom resolution, feed that custom resolution into what we call an encoder, and then output that custom resolution at the decoder, to that ultra-wide display.
Anything you would add, Travis?
Yeah, no, I would agree. I mean, I think it's, I'm sure we'll get to some of this later too, I think cost and management of these devices, where you see that increased adoption on AV over IP, when anything is connected to the network, especially as we continue to move into the IT space, those types of people managing those systems want to be able to have access into those and really just make their AV deployment more efficient as possible. So cost and, the IT management side of things, I think is a big driver as well.
I don't think there's any doubt about that. And we're certainly talking about AV over IP. We're hearing about it in a wide range of applications being deployed from large venues to small spaces like meeting rooms. Do you want to talk about the versatility, some of the factors contributing to it, as well as best practices integrators should keep in mind when choosing an AV over IP solution for different kinds of environments?
Yeah, sure. You want me to take a stab at this one here?
You can go first and I'll dive in after.
Awesome. Cool. I mean, I think, as Kramer and ZV have been around AV over IP for quite, from the inception of it, it used to really just be those large video distribution projects, whether they're going around arenas or digital signage. But as technology has improved, capabilities, even stuff like Dante and USB speeds have increased, we start to see that get deployed in more applications, more projects, and people want the flexibility of being able to say, hey, yeah, I may use this room as kind of an ad hoc meeting space, but the ability to bring in a feed from somewhere else out on the network, I think, really kind of gets AV over IP into most applications. And again, with some of that new technology brought into it, like the USB or Dante or AES67, especially it's almost a little bit of a different market, but like broadcast, has rapidly, really done a lot of stuff with things like NDI, and here at Kramer and ZV, we're, certainly looking at some of those new technologies, what's on the next cusp of AV over IP components, chipsets, compression, all that sorts of stuff.
Wow, I think Travis did a fantastic job there. I don't have really a lot to add to that. So let's move on to the next one.
Sounds good. The acceptance of AV over IP over the last few years, how would you categorize the level of acceptance and how it's changed? And what role industry standards and key players like Kramer AV, for that matter, have played in the evolution?
Yeah. So this is a great question. I've been in, AV over IP for about 9 years now. And our first foray into this category was in the uncompressed world. At the time, the leader for video distribution were pretty much the fixed matrix switchers, using HD-based T technology. And as a general rule, HD-based T is an uncompressed video distribution method. So if you were going to jump into this category of distributing AV, you kind of had to be uncompressed. That was the standard. To try and introduce a compressed solution, something that may be perceived as not having that same level of quality, really it's a tough jump, right? But things have certainly changed in the past 9 years since I got into it. More and more companies have introduced compressed solutions that can get onto a 1 gigabit network that are demonstrating a high enough quality for these applications. So that resistance to AV over IP based on, well, the quality just isn't there. Well, that's gone. Something that 9 years ago, I got a ton of pushback on, you get no pushback on today, because, the technology's been proven. You get the compression such as JPEG 2000 or JPEG XS. It's not lossless, it's not uncompressed, but it's certainly a very good quality for what we're doing here. And certainly, players like ZV, Kramer, and others have helped that, come to be.
So what would you say are some of the most critical factors that integrators should be considering these days as regards infrastructure for deploying AV over IP? I'm thinking stuff like cabling, network capacity. What should integrators have at the forefront of their mind?
Well, I think that one very important topic that maybe a lot of integrators here don't think about is power consumption, and long-term cost of the deployment. If you look at two side-by-side products, one that maybe uses 8 watts of power per endpoint and one that uses 24 watts per endpoint, that's 3 times the amount of power. You look at the cost of that, times 100 endpoints, times 3, 4, 5 years of that deployment, and that's the type of cost that can really add up. I can tell you that my European customers are really paying close attention to that type of thing right now, and I'm really hoping that some of the U.S. customers start paying more attention to it.
Yeah, and also just on power consumption in general is usually when you're drawing more power, that means you have to dissipate a lot more heat. What's great with a low power draw product is there's not a lot of heat to dissipate. So if you got products like in-wall encoders and decoders, you have a much higher rate of stability and reliability of those products too, if not potentially, overheating within those wall cavities.
Last question. How is Kramer continuing to innovate to address evolving needs of integrators, of end users in the AV over IP space? Because obviously Kramer has been, ZV has been a longtime innovator. So I'm curious what you're continuing to do to innovate in this space.
Art, I know you're a little bit more on the product side, so you might even have a little bit further touch or more touch on this, but anything you'd like to add there?
Yeah, so we're always looking at new technology. And that there's certainly a lot of technology you may have heard of, a little stuff that's kind of buzzes. Examples might be, IPMX, SMPTE 2110, and coming out solutions to, kind of fall into those categories. So, I can't speak directly to what Kramer's specifically planning to come out with, but I wouldn't be overly surprised if you saw something that landed in one or both of those categories in the near future from Kramer.
Thank you for whetting our appetite and getting us excited about what you have in the pipeline, because I know it's going to be something very, very cool and that will continue to innovate in this rapidly evolving AV over IP world. Thank you so much, Travis Cawthorne, Director of Products and Training with Kramer AV, and Art Weeks, Product Manager with Kramer AV, for joining me today and giving us a sense of the trends you're seeing in the AV over IP marketplace and how Kramer is, of course, a continuing leader in this field.
Well, thanks for having us, Dan.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dan. We appreciate it.
My name is Dan Farisi, Group Editor, Commercial and Security with Emerald. As I said at the outset, please do check commercialintegrator.com throughout the month of May for AV over IP related content just like this, and check out our AV over IP focused deep dive in the May issue of CI plus SSI. Until next time, we'll see you soon.